Julia, welcome. Do come up to the microphone and join our dots as you go.
Thank you, Anne, and welcome to all of you. 13 million people in the UK are living in poverty. 13 million people who experience daily insecurity and uncertainty, excluded from the norms of a prosperous society and facing impossible decisions. We know that poverty causes significant harm, affecting people's health and well-being, eroding confidence and capability, and damaging life chances. But it also damages our wider society and the economy, depriving us of the skills and talents of people who could otherwise make us stronger. Our new Prime Minister made a bold pledge on the steps of number 10 Downing Street to make Britain a country that works for everyone. Well, that mission has never been more important. The vote to leave the EU was a wake-up call. For too long, many communities have been struggling as the country's prosperity simply passed them by, and they missed out on opportunities to build a better life. Because the reality is that people experiencing the greatest barriers to opportunity all too often receive a response that oscillates wildly between pity and scorn. Together, these emotions create a sense that poverty in the UK is about a group of people who are entirely different from the rest of us, with different desires and motivations. Yet poverty can affect almost anyone, and is something that many people risk and fear as they struggle to make ends meet. Poverty fundamentally affects how communities work and the ability of families to nurture and support. It also fundamentally affects the economy and costs the public purse £78 billion a year. We also spend £70 billion a year on benefits to reduce poverty. The continued existence of high levels of poverty in this country is, I'm going to argue, a problem for everyone, for all of us who want to see a stronger, safer, more sustainable economy. It's a scourge across the 4 nations of the UK. And if present levels of poverty continue, they threaten both the future of our economy and the security of our society. Theresa May said in her first speech as Prime Minister that if you're born poor, you will die on average 9 years earlier than others. Her predecessor quoted that fact too. Let us resolve today that no future Prime Minister can quote that fact again. The former Prime Minister, David Lloyd George, jointly with Seabohm Rowntree, made a similar pledge to the nation in 1929, a moment of some national crisis. We can conquer unemployment, he said. We mobilised for war. Let us mobilise for prosperity. In 2016, it's time we made a new pledge. We can conquer poverty. There, of course, have been many, many previous attempts to end poverty in this country, and many of them have made a huge difference. But they have been partial, short-term, and have rarely commanded long-term political support. By focusing on the poverty facing children, or the particular and critical issues of fuel poverty, they've not been able to look at the long-term dynamic nature of poverty and take the comprehensive review that we have developed. Public policy and official rhetoric around poverty has for several years focused on the small number of workless families and individuals with entrenched problems, often linked to poor mental health or addiction. A really important group. But this stance has the effect of defining the problem of poverty so narrowly that it licenses our society to ignore the true scale and urgency of poverty in the UK. And as we find from all of the work we do with people on low incomes, it means that people themselves find it difficult to admit how hardship is affecting them and their family. This widespread sense of stigma and shame is a block to admitting to ourselves as a society that we have a serious problem which can affect almost anyone. It's easy to be blinded by simplistic and superficial responses. You can blame individuals for the bad decisions they make and fool yourself into believing it could never happen to you. Or you can blame national structures if only the system of tax and benefits could be fundamentally redesigned and structural inequality abolished, then poverty could be ended. Neither argument is an accurate or useful explanation of poverty in the UK, and neither offers a workable solution on its own. Our approach demands a consensus. Stop-start approaches to poverty have fallen short, just as initiatives developed by individual players frequently stall. The nature of poverty in the UK demands a non-partisan, long-term approach, marshalling all the skills and resources of governments, local, national, central, business, employers, trades unions, voluntary organisations, broader civil society, families and individuals. Now, 13 million is a big number. It's possible to respond by either denying it or by finding it all too overwhelming. A problem that big simply cannot be solved. But for the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, with our decades of practice and research, and the injunction of our founder, businessman Joseph Rowntree, ringing in our ears, neither of these responses are good enough. The founding memorandum of JRF commands us not just to find out the causes of social evils, but having done so, to seek to change the face of England. And we would say the UK. We have a bold but a practical heritage. C. Ben Rowntree's own report in 1901 demonstrated that poverty was not a manifestation of weaker morality within the working classes, but did have structural roots, and he brought about social reforms which truly did help to change the face of England. The then Liberal government's view that Britain needed a quality workforce to improve national efficiency has great resonance today as we consider how to remain competitive in the global race. Our world is changing. We're living longer, with more of us with long-term medical conditions and disabilities. Our population is more mobile, more mixed, more diverse. Power is shifting across the 4 nations and cities of the UK, and the pace of technological change is both liberating and challenging. And we must steward our resources responsibly as the public finances are squeezed and we face additional stress from the impact of climate change. Poverty in the UK today is, of course, different from poverty in Rowntree's day. It's different from the poverty of 20 years ago, such is its dynamic nature. While reducing poverty, pensioner poverty is one of the many great successes of public policy, and proof, I would say, that policy can work, today the face of UK poverty is younger, more likely to be working, more insecure, and more often privately renting than in previous generations. If the UK is to thrive in the new century, and what an opportunity to determine our future we have now, we'll need to get to grips with the factors behind these comparatively high levels of poverty. We need to tackle the causes, not just deal with the consequences. When we started on this journey, it was vital to make the process as inclusive as possible. The strategy we have produced is founded on rigorous academic research and has involved political and philosophical thinkers, activists, journalists, think tanks and policymakers, as well as involved employers, businesses, practitioners, the public and voluntary organisations. And crucially, it has put the experiences of people living in poverty at its centre. They don't all agree with everything we're proposing. There are, of course, different views about priorities and choices, about emphasis and solutions. But what we have done is construct the strongest possible platform of evidence, the clearest approach to policy, and the development of recommendations that we believe can, taken together, command support across political, professional, and academic lines. We know that there is a growing consensus that poverty in the UK is real, causes harm, and is a solvable problem. Through this process, we have identified the overlapping concerns which provide the basis of a stronger consensus and a shared effort by the state, market, and individuals. The result is a strategy that is, I hope, bold, practical, and pragmatic. Some of it is disruptive, providing clear alternatives where we found the approach to be failing. Some of it seeks simply to strengthen existing policies and practice. And in it, we propose a new success measure for a prosperous society, one that recognises the costs, the risks, and the waste of poverty, and determines that in the 21st century UK, it's possible to ensure that within a generation, no one is ever destitute. Less than 1 in 10 of the population are in poverty at any one time, and nobody is in poverty for more than 2 years. This vision recognises that there are life events and experiences that can dramatically reduce the income of a household or an individual, but that in a strong and successful society, there are mechanisms in place to avoid that and ensure such experiences are short-lived. Family breakdown can and does create poverty. A strong and successful society works to ensure this doesn't become a scar across the life of the next generation. Illness may well result in loss of income and additional costs, and hence poverty. A strong and successful society intervenes to make sure this experience is short-lived. In a competitive and open economy, there will be job losses and industrial changes. A strong and successful society plans for these changes and ensures against their impact. In a strong and successful economy, destitution is seen as the social evil it is, and there is no place for it in our society. There may always be people in poverty. The experience does not need to be either long-lived or devastating. The strategy you have on your seats is based on a large-scale systematic review of the evidence of poverty's costs, causes and solutions over the life course, which we also published today and has led to our 5-point plan to solve poverty in the UK, which aims to boost incomes and reduce costs, deliver an effective benefit system, improve education standards and raise skills, strengthen families and communities, and promote long-term economic growth benefiting everyone. I'll now deal with these in turn. Boosting incomes and reducing costs. Of course, the money in your pocket is the most obvious symptom of poverty. Too little going in, too much going out. Paid work should offer a route out, and for many millions, that's what it does. But there are reasons people struggle to work full-time. Sick children, ageing parents, disability, ill health are all challenges to earning a decent income. And people continue to face huge discrimination in the labour market and can be locked into poor-paying, insecure work because of their race, disability and gender. And the growing number of insecure jobs, jobs in the much-vaunted gig economy, part-time, seasonal work, are all work that comes and goes but never provides a secure route out of grinding poverty. But it's not just income, essential though that is, it's also the costs. To be in poverty is to have resources that are well below minimum needs. This is, of course, caused by a lack of resources, most obviously income, as well as wealth and friends and family who can help out. But it's also caused by steep prices to meet minimum needs. Some people face extra costs associated with childcare, caring responsibilities, living with a disability. The impact of high costs driving poverty has too often been ignored. Households in poverty are 4 times more likely to be behind with at least one household bill, and they are much more exposed when the price of essentials rises rapidly. The high cost of housing and of childcare in many parts of the UK creates the biggest squeeze on people in poverty. And poverty premiums, where people in poverty pay more for the same goods and services, persist and flourish in our internet-enabled day. In some industries, such as energy and water, consumer bills carry the costs of public policy choices or investments in new infrastructure, which can fall more heavily on people in poverty who consume comparatively less, but contribute more of their incomes than better-off households. Responsible businesses, reformed markets, both have a huge role to play in reducing poverty. So what can we do? We can reduce costs, particularly housing costs. We calculate that spending an extra £1 billion per year in England alone would deliver 80,000 genuinely affordable homes each year to rent and buy. That would drive down the costs of housing and shelter, currently such a large portion of the disposable income of poorer households. We can end the poverty premium by a refreshed mandate for regulators to work closely with civil society groups to identify and act on poverty premiums, and encouraging more charities and social enterprises to enter key markets for essential goods and services. Second, we can deliver an effective benefit system. Our social security system is failing to support people on low incomes adequately, especially those unable to work. And while people are almost always better off in work, incentives are sometimes weak or wiped out by high cost and childcare costs. The nature of today's labour market, with more flexible jobs and rising self-employment, means we need a social security system that can respond to the reality of the very modern labour market. The development of universal credit is positive, and the principle behind it are, we've argued, the right ones, but it has been a casualty of austerity, undermining its potential to reduce poverty. And for those who, for whatever reason, fail to comply with the rules and regulations, the punitive nature of the current regime of sanctions can and does result in destitution. There should be no place for destitution in any system of public support. So what can we do? We can make universal credit a genuine tool of poverty reduction by making sure the value of the payments keep pace with the cost of essentials, by making sure that those unable to work have security, and by ensuring that the work allowances enable people to move towards a decent standard of living when they're in work. Third, improving education standards and raising skills. We have seen in London and elsewhere what sustained effort can do to improve children's school performance. But we know that in every part of the UK there are still disadvantaged children being badly failed. The attainment gap is seen at the age of 3, and from then it only widens. This wastes the skills and potential of millions of children and young people. And at the same time, an estimated 5 million adults in the UK struggle to read and do simple sums, and 12.5 million lack basic digital skills. And we know that many low-paid workers in insecure jobs are much, much less likely to receive the training needed to progress onto higher earnings. So what can we do? We can continue to improve attainment at school for poorer children, because we know it can work, by a relentless focus on raising standards and by continuing to direct additional funding to children from poorer backgrounds. We can expand continuous professional development for teachers, poverty-proof our education system, and experiment with pay premiums to attract the best teachers to schools struggling to recruit. And we can and we must double investment in adult basic skills so that by 2030, all adults have basic literacy, numeracy, and essential digital skills. Fourth, we need to work to strengthen families and communities. People who are at risk of poverty because of unemployment and low skills are always supported first by their family and by their communities. And low-income parents do extraordinary work raising children in incredibly challenging circumstances. But high stress is a major outcome of poverty for individuals and does contribute to family breakdown. For far too many families, balancing working and caring for their children while earning enough to deliver a decent living standard is a constant struggle. For a small number of families, long-term trauma, poor parenting, neglect and abuse can enormously increase the risks of poverty in subsequent generations. The effects can range from the damaging to the truly life-altering, including crime, health problems, drug, alcohol abuse and homelessness. What can we do? We can create family hubs to bring together children and family services and provide the best possible start in life for children. We can radically reform childcare to increase quality, coverage and affordability. This would mean making it free for low-income families where parents are in work, training or preparing for work, and moving to a graduate-led, fully qualified workforce. We can rapidly expand the proven Housing First model where access to ordinary housing is coupled with tailored support for homeless adults with complex needs. And fifthly, we need to promote long-term economic growth benefiting everyone. Sustainable economic growth is the essential underpinning for all efforts to solve poverty, and solving poverty will itself release resource that can be used to boost economic growth. But growth alone is not sufficient. The goal must be inclusive growth, which benefits all people and places. A well-educated and skilled workforce, jobs that offer security and enable families to achieve a decent living standard, and actions that connect people in poverty to economic opportunities provide the basis of any plan to solve poverty. And there is no sense in a strategy to solve poverty which ignores geography. Some places have been deeply affected by deindustrialization and have not recovered. Others face low housing supply and high costs, trapping people in poverty. Places that lack jobs and have poor digital and transport connectivity, limited services and poor environments are places in which people can and are trapped in poverty. Now, devolution is one of the defining political agendas of our time, and it must become a defining feature of how we solve poverty. as powers and responsibilities shift from Westminster and Whitehall to Edinburgh, Cardiff and Belfast, we have an opportunity to ensure that long-term sustainable responses can be crafted by different tiers of government, identifying the particular economies and cultures in which poverty thrives. But devolution of power and responsibility does not guarantee action. It's the painstaking and serious collaboration between partners and governments in the 4 nations of the UK that will ensure that proper, long-term and evidence-based approaches to solving problems are enacted. The UK government, working with national governments in Holyrood, Stormont, Cardiff Bay, have that opportunity. The costs and wastes of failing to take this opportunity are enormous. But it's not just the national governments of the 4 nations or the UK. Local government has both opportunity and motive. While local authorities face unprecedented reductions to their budgets, greater powers in vital areas such as transport, housing, employment support and skills can be harnessed to help those on low incomes. Local authorities, working with other anchor institutions in their area, developing excellent public services and an inclusive economic vision tailored for their area and bringing together local partners to deliver it. And of course, the great cities of the UK, with their unbreakable link with economic growth and their new powers and responsibilities, are crucial actors in the work to solve UK poverty. What can we do? Employers and businesses, enabling people to get on at work through job opportunities, paying the voluntary living wage where they can, offering equal access to training and promotion for low-paid staff and those working part-time, and critically increasing job security. And local authorities using the tools and the incentives they do have and securing more to grow inclusive economies that genuinely connect people in poverty to economic opportunity. The shift to a prosperous poverty-free UK will not happen quickly, but with commitment, coordination and vision it is possible. But this is not just about central, national or even local government. We all have a part to play in solving poverty. Businesses, trades unions, employers, investors, public services and voluntary organisations can all make a difference. Across the UK, in many of your organisations, people are already working to reduce poverty in cities, businesses and communities. Many businesses and employers know that their interests align with those of wider society and create and extend economic opportunity, particularly for people living in the places that have been left behind by economic change. And all over the country, citizens, workers, community groups are developing locally led approach in response to local needs. But businesses and communities can't be expected to do it all on their own. National, devolved and local governments have a role as partners, working with businesses, employers and trade unions to better connect people to economic opportunities. Many already are, with a number of cities pioneering long-term economic strategies to promote more inclusive, more sustainable growth, working with partners to develop their local labour markets and skills. The devolved jurisdictions too are showing commitment and enthusiasm to solve poverty. Wales is leading the way on tackling homelessness. Scotland is planning to reduce the cost for poorer households, and Northern Ireland is developing a better work agenda with an ambitious social strategy aimed to reduce poverty. While devolution to the nations and cities doesn't by itself lower poverty, it can open up the opportunities to improve the prospects of our citizens. JRF will continue to work within each nation to build on the momentum that exists already in order to solve poverty. And let's never forget that it's the determination and drive of people themselves that solve poverty in every family and every community. It's the task of all of us to make sure that they have the tools and the skills to build a better life for themselves and their families. Without that, we are all hugely diminished. This strategy does demand change. Change in how we allocate resource, the decisions we make in the 4 nations of the UK, and the priorities we set as employers, as businesses, and as civic leaders. It demands commitment over a long period. Our ambition, let's remember, is that a child starting school this term will leave school and become an adult in a country where no one is destitute. No more than 10% of the population are ever in poverty, and no one is in poverty for more than 2 years. This is no fantasy wish list. It's a description of a realistic, hard-headed country that knows that we're currently wasting skills and talents, building up enormous costs because of our failure to ensure that our fellow citizens can contribute. The costs of failing to do this long-term are eye-watering, both economically and politically. 2 months ago, we voted as a country to leave the EU. That historic vote shone a bright, perhaps deeply uncomfortable light on the underlying divisions in modern Britain caused by poverty. Poverty divides communities and generations. It harms the potential of our people and strains families. It drains the public purse and it holds back our economy. JRF is calling for a long-term deal between individuals, the state and business, so that the first generation of Brexit children starting school this week grow up in a country where no matter where they live, everyone has a chance of a decent and secure life. Poverty is the biggest social evil of our time. It is time for us all to act. Thank you.